Hi, I'm Carmelico, and today I'll teach you guys how I render my artwork. Disclaimer, I am not by any means a professional, but I have gotten countless comments asking for tutorials, so this is all based off of my preferences. I will go through my step-by-step process of base color, shading, and rendering. I will also provide tips and general advice when it comes to rendering. So let's start off with brushes. Brushes. First, you need to find a brush you like in order to be able to render comfortably. The brushes I use have blending properties which most artists use in order to blend the colors easily with more control, since the blur tool is more difficult to blend more seamlessly. There will be these types of brushes no matter what software you're using. However, I am going to be using Clip Studio Paint. But as for what you draw on may affect how well you draw because you want something comfortable but also good to showcase your art skills. A budget but amazing screen tablet that I will be using for this illustration is the Huion Kamvas 2021. It is 16 inches, which is a bit bigger than my normal tablet, and includes lots of the artist essentials such as the tablet stand, cords, finger glove, and more. And in my opinion, very budget friendly compared to other screen tablets. But back to the video, base color. Picking out colors will affect the atmosphere of the illustration. For me, I use warm tone colors. And if you struggle with picking out colors, you should have an idea what type of color scheme will suit your art style the most. Whether it is monotone, saturated, desaturated, and so on. After you decide what type of color scheme you want to go for, this is how I pick colors depending on what I want to do. So first things first, this is the hue, and this is the shade. This indicates values and this indicates saturation, which will be important because you want to have enough value, and saturation will help you pick out colors for what type of color scheme you want. For example, if I wanted a desaturated color palette for my artwork, be picking colors towards the desaturated areas, that is towards the gray. You can just change the hue to get different colors, and there you have a desaturated color palette. It's important to note to stay in those areas once you pick whether you want a saturated or desaturated color palette, because if you have saturated and desaturated colors, it's gonna look off, unless it's a stylistic choice. Before I insert the base colors, I add a background that is darker or more vibrant to see the colors I am inserting more clearly, since filling in some colors may be more difficult to see when you're using a white background. Before I shade, I airbrush general colors such as the blush, skin, etc. You'll also need to understand values before you shade. Being able to understand values will help your coloring and shading tremendously, since if the shading is too light, the viewer may not know what to look at. When shading, I change the color wheel to a darker shade and hue. I will usually only have a couple different base shades. As you can see, when I shade eyes, I have the first shade, which is a darker shade from the base color, the darkest shade, and the lightest shade. It's important to know I always use off-white and off-black. This is so I have more shading options, or so it's not as harsh. This is where the painting brush comes into play, because I just place the second darkest shade as base shadows in creases and places where I want to add texture, and then I color pick my base color again to blend and create more depth in my shading. Sometimes I use a hard brush to create more hard edge details that I may want to accentuate. The darkest shade. I put this in places such as the back hair and deep crevices to create more depth in my illustration. This is so all the features of the drawing are more prominent. It is important to have darker shades and hues in your illustration so that you won't struggle with having shading that is too light, which causes it to go unnoticed. And last, highlights. For the highlights, I use an add glow layer or glow dodge layer and airbrush a little bit of the base color in the areas I want to add highlight. I just put highlights in usual spots like the hair and on the outer edges of any areas. I also add a bit of ambient light, which is just a reflective color, usually with the skin color, and other colors that are reflecting that will make the shadows more defined. Step 3. Rendering. This is where you polish the whole illustration. I usually don't mind the mistakes that I make during the process, because when I finish shading, I merge all the layers or I just insert all the layers I use in a folder and use my trusty liquify tool after analyzing what needs to be fixed. After that, I will add a layer on top of everything to fix mistakes, clean the sketch, and add small details such as lashes, hair strands, and texture. I also render the eyes more so the audience is more drawn to the face. I usually also take this time to add details I wasn't able to or just thought of, such as these small accessories I added that weren't originally planned. Finally, the final touches I do is add an overlay layer clipped to the folder that contains all my layers and use Perlin noise for a grainy texture. You can adjust it however, but I set it to the smallest. Then I lowered the opacity. For illustrations that I want a softer look to, I alpha lock and airbrush the skin color to the line art layer. Then I copy and paste the line art layer and Gaussian blur it. Then I lower the opacity to my liking. I also add a soft light layer and airbrush red and orange to the face. And you can see there's a big difference with and without it. Last but not least, I use an add glow layer and put it in areas that I want to highlight, such as the eyes, or skin, or places that may have been too dark. But that is all. Thank you for watching, and thank you again to Huion for granting me the opportunity to review the tablet. And once again, have a wonderful day.